So originally I was going to include this in my next 20 album roundups, but I kept finding more things to talk about on this one, and there's one piece in particular that I really want to dive into. So in that case, I figured, okay, this one deserves a full-length album review. So let's dive into it. Firebird by Dirt Poor Robins. So Dirt Poor Robins is a duo from Louisville, Kentucky. Neil and Kate DeGrady, I believe is how you pronounce their last name, got their start very independently and has continued to do so. I really got into them when they put out their Queen of the Night last year. A couple of my chums, Nathan on Shuffle, as well as Rhyme Signature, both really said you guys got to check these guys out because they have flavors of like Deer Hunter is kind of like the really easiest one-to-one, and having this kind of cinematic indie rock style of things. I'm also getting flavors of like symphonic rock from like the 70s, that very playful, very fun style of things, but also got that really like big soundscapey, very playful theatrical style of things that I don't feel like, yeah, sure, Deer Hunter definitely flirt with quite a bit, but these guys are like, if the musical theater kids loved rock, this is what they would do. You know, like I'm getting like Decemberists are another one that kind of come to my mind and being very theatrical, telling stories through songs, very similar to that. And I loved Queen of the Night. It was very like a vibes album. Like I didn't necessarily love any specific track off of that one outside of Penelope Grave, Babylon, and Enchanté. But like the album itself was just this vibe that I really, really loved and was really looking forward to anything else Dirt Poor Robins decided to put out. And lo and behold, earlier this year, late last year, we got Prelude to the Firebird, which is like half of the album. And then a couple weeks ago, we got the full thing of Firebird. And I was very interested to hear what they were going to do. And okay, how do I talk about this album properly? At least the way that I want to talk about this album. For the most part, I wouldn't necessarily say I was disappointed with this album, but with a lot of my contemporaries, Rhyme Signatures, Nathan on Shuffle, love you guys. You guys are my boys. I just felt like their enthusiasm for this album was not mirrored by my enjoyment of this album. The first bit of this album was fine. It was fine. It was fine. But I didn't have that same kind of vibes feeling that I had with Queen of the Night. Like Queen of the Night felt very established in the story that it was telling, you know? This one just felt very episodic. It just felt like little vignettes within whatever world they were trying to construct that didn't have this overarching feel to it. And there were tracks on here that I enjoyed. You know, Fever Dream was one that I really enjoyed. All at Once and To the Heights I felt were very punchy, very poppy, very accessible. And, you know, there were a number of times where I'm like, why aren't these guys getting radio play? And it's just the way that the big musical industry machine is set up. Of course, these guys aren't going to get radio play, but like it's a little bit of a travesty because these tracks can sit side by side by, you know, an Imagine Dragons track or a Gwen Stefani track or, you know, those really accessible, fun pop tracks. And it really wasn't until we got So Long to Yesterday, Empty, The Imperishables, and the title track of Firebird. Those last 4 tracks really knocked me on my ass. And it made me reassess this album because this was the point where the thread started to pull and I could see the picture. You know, this was where those final puzzle pieces were coming into place. And I was just like, oh, it was kind of like staring at a magic eye puzzle and trying to figure out what it was that everybody else was seeing. And then suddenly I could see that phoenix, you know, that everybody else was seeing. And I'm like, okay, I get it now. And it was that second half of The Imperishables, the second last track, where just this very, very subtle measure, this very subtle musical accent came through. And it was the theme to Firebird from Stravinsky. And I broke down. I absolutely broke down. And then that theme, that measure is carried through and is the main theme and main measure for the title track of Firebird that just made me weep. Because Firebird is one of my all-time favorite pieces of music. You know, Stravinsky is one of my idols. I absolutely love everything that he does. Rites of Spring is one of my favorites. I've seen the Firebird be performed a number of times by a full-on orchestra, and every single time I weep because it's just so moving. It's so beautiful. And hearing them recontextualize that theme into a symphonic rock presentation was something that like Tomada was doing with electronic music back in the 70s. And it's this recontextualizing the theme, the ideas, and theme not only within the musical themes, but theme in terms of like a literary theme of what the Firebird means in the context of this record and the story that Dirt Poor Robins is trying to tell was extremely moving and extremely brilliant, which then made me restart the album with this idea of the Firebird being the allegory for the overall story and the overall music that's being told. And now I'm starting to see more of these breadcrumbs being led through the album, because I will admit, when I first heard The Imperishables, it kind of came out of nowhere, where I'm like, whoa, they're using Stravinsky to amplify the theme within the music. And at first I'm like, this is the only instance that I heard it. But then I'm going back and I'm re-listening to a lot of these tracks. And I'm like, oh no, there's this movement there. And there's this item here. And again, it's like these little breadcrumbs that have been kind of laid out throughout the entire album. You know, you have those first 3 tracks of Political, Cry Wolf, and You'll Never Hear It Coming that are very similar to the opening measures within the Firebird, where it's, you know, this very docile, very small, very moody and atmospheric piece that then begins to come into the next one of Fever Dream, Beauty Will Save You, and To the Heights, which is much more immediate, much more impactful, much more poppy in that presentation. And again, To the Heights is one of those big tracks, and I'm like, this should be played on the airways. Then we come to All at Once, Holy Roller, and So Long Yesterday, which are those big destructive moments, that big oomph, that big, you know, explosion moments. And then you have Empty, The Imperishables being that kind of building back up, still taking that like destruction, trying to figure out what to do with it, and building that forward until the final crescendo of the whole piece, which is The Imperishables and the Firebird. So their ability to take the blueprint of Stravinsky and lay it down on top of this cinematic, symphonic rock, this indie rock, this progressive rock, was absolutely brilliant. And it created a amazing, digestible record that I absolutely loved. It is a case, though, I will admit, all that being said, it is a case where I will sit through those moments of this album that I don't necessarily connect with to get to that brilliance of the ending. And that, you can take it however you want. I'm okay to do that. I'm not sure if everybody's okay to do that, because there are moments on this album that I'm like, I'm not really feeling it, or doesn't really connect with me all that much. But luckily, those moments that do really connect me, like To the Heights, Cry Wolf, and then Empty, Imperishables, and Firebird, are enough to at least string me along. You know, it's enough to keep me interested. But really, it's those last couple of moments on this album that I broke down with. So this, along with Queen of the Night, I hope will be the 1-2 punch to put Dirt Poor Robins more on the map and more as an established progressive rock outfit, to the same extent that, say, Decemberists, the Deer Hunter, and even some of the more quirky ones like Reign of Kindo are. I'm really hoping that this one kind of puts them on that stage. And it is for that reason that I will say Firebird by Dirt Poor Robins is an album I would absolutely pick up in physical format. Maybe not as strong start to finish as Queen of the Night, but where this album hits, it hits so hard. There's nothing on Queen of the Night that hits harder than the hardest hitting moments on this record. And it's, you know, I find like these two records are very well balanced in that sense. So yeah, love this record. I hope you'll check it out. So that's what I've got for Firebird from Dirt Poor Robins. What did you guys think about this record? Did you love it? Did you hate it? Whatever you thought, please let me know by commenting down below. And yeah, that's what I've got for you guys today. So thank you all so much for watching. As always, you guys are definitely the best. And until next time, notes out.